A powerful CEO trapped in a family ultimatum marries a stranger, only to find she's the one risk he fears. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The night rain falls in thin silver lines across the glass walls of the Hale Dominion penthouse, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and red. Adrian Hale stands alone on the marble balcony, his tailored suit still crisp despite the storm pressing against him. He looks like a man carved from ice, a man who has spent his entire life learning that feelings cost more than fortune. Inside his jacket is a legal envelope, thick, heavy, humming with the weight of a choice he never wanted to make. His grandmother's ultimatum still echoes in his head: marry before your 30th birthday, or the company passes to the board. Adrian has 15 days left. 15 days to keep the empire he built with blood and precision. 15 days to find a wife he doesn't want. That's when the service elevator dings softly behind him. Mira Lawson steps out, her hair damp from the storm, her thrift store shoes squeaking against the polished floor. She's here by accident, sent to deliver a misplaced coat after working a 16-hour diner shift. She clutches the garment to her chest as if it might shield her from the chandelier brightness swallowing the room. Adrian turns. Their eyes meet. For a moment, New York fades to silence. She doesn't know who he is. She doesn't care about the wealth he wears like armor. All she sees is a tired man standing alone in the rain. And something inside him, something old, something aching, stirs. He studies her, this stranger who accidentally wandered into the highest floor of his world. She shouldn't be here. She doesn't belong here. And yet, she's exactly what he needs. The envelope crinkles in his hand. He steps closer, voice low, steady, a CEO negotiating with fate itself. I need a wife, he says. Mira blinks, startled. Sorry, what? Adrian holds out the envelope. Not a real one. A contract. You'll be compensated. You'll be protected. You'll walk away in 1 year with your life changed. The rain behind him is relentless, 1,000 tiny drumbeats marking the impossibility of this moment. Mira opens her mouth to answer, but the lights flicker across her worried face, and Adrian is suddenly aware of how fragile she looks, how wrong this must sound, how desperate he must be to say it out loud. Still, he pushes on, because the clock is ticking, and empires do not wait for emotions. Marry me, he whispers. Just for 1 year. No strings. But as she stares at him, confused, frightened, trembling, he already senses the truth he refuses to admit: she is a risk he cannot calculate, a variable he cannot control, and the only person who might break the walls he spent a lifetime building. The storm outside feels heavier as Mira stands frozen, staring at the envelope in Adrian Hale's hand. For a moment, she thinks she misheard him. People like her do not receive marriage proposals from CEOs in penthouses overlooking Manhattan. But Adrian waits, jaw tight, posture controlled, his expression unreadable except for the faintest flicker of urgency. She steadies her breathing, clutching the misplaced coat she came to deliver. Why me? She finally whispers. Adrian looks at her as if he has analyzed every possible answer. Because you have nothing to gain from lying to me, he says. Because you walked into this floor by accident and did not try to impress me. Because you looked me in the eyes and did not flinch. His voice drops lower. And because time is running out. Something in his tone does not match the cold image printed in business magazines. There is a crack in his armor, a small one, but enough for her to sense the truth. You said the contract. Mira asks, still trying to make sense of the impossible. Adrian opens the envelope and hands her a single page. The wind sweeps across the balcony, rustling the paper between them. She skims the terms, her throat tightening. 1 year of marriage. Appear at 6 family events. Maintain privacy. A generous payout that could erase her mother's medical debt in an instant. No intimacy required. No emotional expectations. No future beyond the expiration date. It feels unreal, like a scene from someone else's life. Why not someone from your world, she asks. Someone who understands all of this. Adrian exhales slowly, rain sliding down the back of his suit. Because everyone in my world wants something. Power. Access. Control. His eyes settle on her again, sharp but searching. You want none of that. Mira shakes her head, overwhelmed by fear and the magnitude of what this would mean. I just wanted to return a coat. And I just wanted a solution, he replies. Maybe fate is laughing at both of us tonight. She looks away, down at the city glowing beneath the storm clouds. She thinks of the overdue rent notice taped to her apartment door. She thinks of her mother's inhaler refills that she can barely afford. She thinks of the double shifts, the exhaustion, the quiet suffocating pressure. A year of stability. A year where nothing collapses. But also, a year living beside a man she does not know. A man who carries power like a second skin. Adrian seems to read her hesitation. You will not be trapped, he says softly. You will not be hurt. If at any point you want out, I will not force you to stay. I just need someone who will not betray me. There is something unexpectedly vulnerable in the way he says betrayal, as if it is a wound that never fully healed. Mira forces herself to swallow the fear. This is insane, she murmurs. Absolutely insane. Yes, he agrees without irony. But it is also our only option. She closes her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of rain fill the silence between them. When she opens them again, Adrian Hale is still standing there, waiting, offering her a life that terrifies her as much as it tempts her. Slowly, with a trembling breath, she reaches for the pen clip to the envelope. Tell me what happens next, she says. Adrian's voice is quiet, steady, a man who controls entire boardrooms yet seems afraid of this one answer. Next, he says, we sign it. Together. As she holds the pen, her pulse thunders in her ears. Adrian watches her like a man watching fate make its decision. And for the first time since she stepped into the penthouse, Mira Lawson realizes that this night is not just the beginning of a contract. It is the beginning of something. Neither of them is prepared for. The pen feels heavier than it should as Mira holds it, the city humming beneath the storm outside the penthouse windows. Adrian stands still, watching her with the kind of restrained intensity that makes her pulse race. She signs her name, each letter trembling, and when she finishes, Adrian takes the pen from her hand with a carefully controlled breath, as if he has been holding it for too long. It is done, he says quietly. The words seem to echo in the vast room. For a heartbeat, neither of them moves. Then Adrian slips the contract back into the envelope and seals it. His movements are precise, almost clinical, but the silence between them is not cold anymore. It is charged. Mira finally exhales. So what now? Adrian studies her, and for the first time, his expression softens. Now, he says, we prepare. Within the hour, a sleek black car arrives to take Mira to a private fitting at a tailor's loft in Midtown. She has never been in a car this expensive, and she sits stiffly in the leather seat, her fingers gripping her thrift store purse. Her reflection in the dark window looks nothing like the girl who worked the late shift 2 hours ago. The driver opens the door for her when they arrive, and the sudden brightness of the loft nearly blinds her. Rows of gowns shimmer under soft lighting, fabrics she only saw in magazines displayed like art. A woman with silver hair and sharp eyes approaches. You must be Mira. I am Sabine, she says, her voice warm but efficient. Mr. Hale told me to make sure you look like you belong at his family's gathering this weekend. Mira's heart stumbles. His family. Sabine nods. The Hales will want to meet their new daughter-in-law. Mira almost forgets how to breathe. This is suddenly real, painfully real, much faster than she expected. Sabine moves with quiet confidence, pulling gowns, comparing colors to Mira's skin tone, taking measurements with tape and pins. Mira stands on a pedestal, arms slightly raised, while fabric pools around her feet like liquid light. It is overwhelming, yet something inside her begins to settle. She never imagined a life where someone tended to her like this, where someone cared about how she looked or how she fit into a room. Hours later, Sabine steps back and gives a small nod. "This one," she says, touching a midnight blue gown that ripples like the night sky. "It is elegant but strong. You will not disappear beside him." Mira swallows hard. She has spent most of her life trying not to be noticed, and now she is expected to stand beside one of the most powerful men in the city as if she belongs there. She leaves the loft with a garment bag over her arm, the weight of it strange and foreign. The car brings her back to her neighborhood, where cracked pavement and broken streetlights feel sharper than ever. As she walks up the stairs to her apartment, her neighbor's television blares through the thin walls, reminding her exactly where she comes from. Inside, her mother is asleep on the couch, breathing in soft uneven patterns, an inhaler on the table beside her. Mira gently tucks a blanket around her, then sits on the edge of the couch, staring at her own hands. She just signed away a year of her life. A year living beside Adrian Hale. A year pretending to be someone she is not. Her phone buzzes. A message from an unknown number: "Driver will arrive at 8 tomorrow morning. We will begin your media training." Adrian. Mira's pulse jumps. Media training. Family introduction. A marriage that is not real. A man who feels too complicated to read. She types back, "I will be ready." But as she sets the phone down, she whispers to herself, "I hope I really will be." That night, as the storm finally quiets, Mira lies awake in the dark, her mind racing with questions she cannot answer. In the penthouse across the city, Adrian stands alone again on his balcony, the signed contract in his hand, wondering why he feels the smallest hint of fear. Not fear of losing his company. Not fear of defying his family. But fear of the woman who said yes. Morning sunlight filters weakly through Mira's thin curtains as she wakes to the sound of her alarm at 7:45. Her heart beats a little too fast, remembering the message from Adrian, media training at 8. She dresses quickly, tying her hair back and splashing cold water on her face in an attempt to calm her nerves. When she steps outside, a sleek black SUV is already waiting at the curb. Polished so perfectly that the grey sky reflects on its surface. The driver nods and opens the door for her, and she sits inside, clasping her hands together as the city blurs past. They arrive at a private studio tucked inside an office tower, where the walls are lined with soft lights and cameras. A poised woman with short hair and a charcoal grey suit greets her. "Mira Lawson, I am Dr. Celine Ward," she says with a firm handshake. "Today, we are preparing you for the Hale family gathering and any media interaction that may come with it." Mira tries to smile, but her stomach twists. Dr. Ward gestures to a high chair and several screens. "We will begin with posture, speaking tone, and how to respond when someone tries to provoke you. Wealthy families and the press can be unpredictable." Mira feels a chill at the way she says unpredictable, but she listens carefully. She practices controlling her breathing, smoothing her shoulders, and responding to mock interview questions. "What attracted you to Adrian Hale? How does it feel to join one of the most powerful families in the country? Do you believe your background will be an issue?" The last question stings more than she expects. She answers honestly, "Everyone comes from somewhere. I am not ashamed of mine." Dr. Ward raises an eyebrow, then nods approvingly. "That honesty is your strength. Do not lose it." After 3 hours of training, Mira feels both exhausted and strangely steadier. When she steps into the hallway to take a breath, Adrian is standing there, checking his watch. He looks up immediately. His gaze flicks from her face to her posture, noting every tiny change. "How was it?" he asks. She hesitates. "Overwhelming. But helpful." Adrian gives a small nod, almost a smile. Good. There is more to do. He leads her to a private dining room where a simple lunch has been laid out. Mira sits across from him, still unsure of how to behave in this new world. Adrian notices. You do not need to perform here, he says. This is not a test. Mira relaxes slightly, but then the question slips out before she can stop it. What is your family like? Adrian pauses for a long moment. Complicated, he finally says. Powerful. Opinionated. They expect perfection because they fear losing control. His jaw tenses, and Mira realizes there is a weight behind those words she has not yet seen. Is that why you need this marriage? She asks gently. Adrian's eyes narrow as if deciding how much truth to reveal. It is why they expect it, he says. My grandmother believes the company should remain within the family. She believes marriage proves stability. And do you believe that? He meets her eyes, something unreadable flickering in them. I believe stability is a myth people cling to. Control is the only real currency. There is an ache behind the harshness, a quiet hollowness she cannot ignore. After lunch, they ride the elevator down to the lobby together. For the first time, they stand close enough for Mira to notice how weary he looks beneath the polished exterior. When the doors slide open, cameras flash unexpectedly. Paparazzi swarm the entrance, shouting questions. Adrian, who is she? Is this your fiancé? When is the wedding? Mira freezes, her chest tightening. Adrian steps forward instantly, placing a steadying hand at her back. No comments today, he says sharply. The driver rushes to open the car door, and Adrian shields her from the flashes as she climbs inside. When the door shuts, Mira exhales shakily. Adrian studies her, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly. You handled that well, he says. She lets out a nervous laugh. I did not handle anything. You protected me. For the first time, something warm flickers in his eyes. That is my job now, he says softly. As the car pulls away from the flashing lights, Mira presses her hands to her chest, trying to steady her heartbeat. She knew the contract would change her life, but she did not realize it would begin changing her this fast, or that Adrian Hale's presence would start to affect her in ways she cannot explain. The next morning arrives with a sharp chill in the air, the kind that makes the city feel louder and faster than usual. Mira wakes before her alarm, her heart already beating quickly at the thought of the Hale family gathering later that evening. She sits on the edge of her bed, staring at the garment bag hanging on the wall and wondering how a single night could change her life so completely. At exactly 8 o'clock, the black SUV arrives again. When she steps outside, Adrian is already inside the vehicle, dressed in a dark suit that sharpens every line of his posture. He looks up from his tablet when she enters, his gaze sweeping over her as if measuring her readiness. Good morning, he says, voice calm and even. She nods, gripping her hands together. Good morning. The ride is quiet but not uncomfortable. Adrian watches the city pass by, but Mira can feel the weight of his attention shifting to her every few moments. She senses he wants to speak, but words seem like a fragile thing between them, too delicate to mishandle. They arrive at the Hale estate just before noon, a sprawling stone property surrounded by manicured hedges and iron gates. The house looks like it belongs in a magazine or a political biography, not in the life of someone like Mira. As they step out, Adrian notices the way her breath catches. Do not let the scale intimidate you, he says softly. This place is old money. Old expectations. None of it defines you. His reassurances surprise her, partly because they sound sincere and partly because she realizes he rarely speaks without intent. Inside, the entrance hall is filled with portraits of stern ancestors, their painted eyes following her with silent judgment. Adrian leads her toward a long dining room where a woman sits at the table, back straight as a blade. Her silver hair is pinned neatly, and her expression carries the authority of someone who has never been told no. Grandmother, Adrian says, his voice steady but cool. The woman stands and examines Mira with a gaze that could slice glass. "So this is the girl you chose," she says, not bothering to hide her skepticism. "Mira Lawson," Mira says quietly, offering her hand. The older woman does not take it. Instead, she circles Mira slowly, as if inspecting an object rather than a human being. "Your posture is nervous," she says. "Your shoes are inexpensive. And your accent is not from our circles." Mira feels her cheeks heat, but she keeps her voice steady. "You are correct. I am not from your world. I am here because Adrian asked me to be." The grandmother pauses, her gaze sharpening. For a moment, the entire room stills, and then an unexpected smirk lifts the corner of her mouth. "At least you are honest," she says. She turns to Adrian. "Better than the last 3 women you entertained." They were. Terrified to speak. Adrian's jaw tightens, but he does not respond. The luncheon begins, and Mira is seated beside Adrian while the grandmother peppers her with questions, some polite, some painfully pointed. "What is your education level? Where was your father born? Do you understand the responsibilities that come with the Hale name?" Mira answers each one with quiet confidence, even when her hands tremble beneath the table. And every time she stumbles, Adrian speaks up smoothly, redirecting or clarifying, never once letting her flounder alone. When the conversation shifts toward business, Mira lets out a small breath, thinking she is safe for a moment. But the grandmother's gaze snaps back to her. "Tell me, Mira," she says, tapping her spoon lightly. "What do you think Adrian lacks most?" The question hits her like a sudden gust of cold wind. Mira glances at Adrian, who raises an eyebrow, clearly curious how she will respond. Slowly, she says, "I think Adrian lacks rest. He has spent so many years fighting for control that he no longer remembers what peace feels like." Adrian freezes, the smallest flicker of emotion crossing his eyes. Something unspoken passes between them, something fragile and startling. The grandmother sits back, studying both of them. After a long pause, she says, "Dinner begins at 7. I expect you both on time." When she leaves the room, Mira releases a breath she did not realize she was holding. Adrian turns to her, his voice low and unreadable. No one has ever said that to her before. Mira swallows. "Was I wrong?" He shakes his head slowly. "No. You were honest." As they walk back toward the entrance, Mira feels his hand brush hers for a brief second, not a touch, not a gesture, just a moment of proximity that sends a ripple of warmth through her. And for the first time since signing the contract, she realizes Adrian Hale is not the only one in danger of losing control. The afternoon drifts into early evening as Adrian and Mira return to the penthouse to prepare for the dinner that will determine whether the Hale family accepts their arrangement. The city outside glows in warm tones, but inside, the air feels tense, almost electric. Mira stands in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, clutching the garment bag Sabine prepared, her reflection faint against the sunset. Adrian watches her from across the room, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. "You handled my grandmother better than anyone I have brought here," he says quietly. "Do not underestimate what that means." Mira lets out a soft breath. "She was testing me." "She always tests," Adrian replies, moving closer. "She has to know what people are made of." Mira turns toward him, hesitating. "And what do you think I am made of?" Adrian stops just a few steps away, studying her the way someone examines a truth they did not expect. "Strength," he says. "More than you know." The words settle inside her, warm and unsettling all at once. Mira retreats to the guest room to change, slipping into the midnight blue gown Sabine had chosen. The fabric hugs her waist and drapes elegantly at her shoulders, transforming her into someone who could stand beside a man like Adrian Hale without disappearing. When she steps into the hallway, she almost turns back, the moment feels too exposed, too vulnerable. But Adrian appears at the far end, adjusting his cufflinks, and his gaze lifts to her slowly. For a heartbeat, he forgets to breathe. Mira feels it, the shift in the air, the silent impact of his eyes softening. Adrian walks toward her with a steadiness that feels deliberate. "You look," he stops, searching for a word, choosing carefully. "Extraordinary." Mira's cheeks warm despite her best effort to stay composed. "You clean up well too," she says quietly. His lips curve in the faintest smile. "Come." The car is waiting. The ride to the estate is quieter than before, but not with fear. It feels charged with something neither of them is ready to name. When they arrive, lights spill across the driveway, and guests in expensive suits and gowns sweep through the grand entrance. Adrian steps out first, then offers his hand to Mira. She hesitates only a second before taking it. His grip is warm, steady, grounding. Inside, the dining hall is filled with laughter, crystal chandeliers, and the low hum of conversations woven with power. People turn to look at them the moment they enter. Adrian leans down slightly. "Do not worry," he whispers. "Just follow my lead." Mira nods, lifting her chin. They weave through the crowd, exchanging polite greetings. Some faces show curiosity, some skepticism, but one stands out immediately. A woman in a deep red gown approaches with sharp confidence, her smile sweet but her eyes calculating. "Adrian," she says. "I was wondering when you would arrive." Adrian's posture stiffens subtly. "Victoria." Mira realizes this must be the cousin Adrian mentioned only briefly, the one with ambition sharp enough to cut glass. Victoria's gaze slides to Mira, assessing her with quick, cool precision. "And you must be the fiancé," she says. "What was your name again?" "Mira Lawson," Mira replies calmly. Victoria's smile widens, but it is not friendly. "Right. The girl no one has ever heard of." Adrian steps closer to Mira, his voice edged with warning. "Victoria, do not start." "I am only asking questions," Victoria says innocently, turning back to Mira. "Tell me, how does someone with your background fall into the arms of a Hale? Fate? Luck? Something less poetic?" Mira stands very still, remembering Dr. Ward's guidance, Sabine's encouragement, and the quiet strength Adrian insisted she had. "Maybe it is simple," Mira says. Maybe Adrian chose someone who sees him as a person and not a prize. The surrounding guests fall silent for a moment. Victoria's smile falters. Adrian looks at Mira, and something warm flickers behind his eyes, a silent gratitude. Before Victoria can retort, the grandmother enters, calling everyone to dinner. Adrian gently places a hand at the small of Mira's back as they move toward the long table. The touch is brief but undeniably protective. As they take their seats, Mira feels the weight of the chandelier light above them, the scrutiny of dozens of eyes, and the subtle closeness of the man beside her. This marriage was supposed to be a contract, nothing more. But tonight, beneath the gleam of crystal lights and the quiet hum of expectations, something begins to shift. Not in the agreement. Not in the plan. But in their hearts. Dinner begins with the soft clinking of silverware and the low murmur of conversations weaving across the long table. Mira sits beside Adrian, trying to keep her shoulders relaxed as the eyes of the Hale family and their distinguished guests flick toward her again and again. The grandmother sits at the head of the table, her expression sharp and unreadable, while Victoria lounges a few seats away, swirling her wine with a predatory sort of satisfaction. The first half of dinner is polite enough, filled with small talk and occasional questions directed at Mira, some kind, some subtly condescending, but manageable. Adrian answers for her when necessary, stepping in with smooth redirects that protect her from the more pointed inquiries. But as dessert is served, the atmosphere shifts. Victoria sets down her glass with a deliberate clink. "Well," she says, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "Since we are all gathered here as a family, perhaps it is time we discuss something more transparent." Adrian tenses beside Mira. "Victoria," he warns. She ignores him. "I think," she continues with a practiced smile, "that we deserve to know more about the woman who will soon carry our family name. After all, we know nothing about her background, her family, her education, her intentions. Mira feels her stomach twist, but she forces her expression to remain steady. Adrian leans slightly toward her, his voice low. You do not have to respond. Victoria lifts an eyebrow. Unless, of course, she is hiding something. A ripple of whispers travels down the table. Mira takes a slow breath, preparing to speak, but before she can, Victoria pulls out her phone and taps it lightly against her wine glass. In fact, she says, I took the liberty of doing a little research. And what I found was interesting. The grandmother's eyes sharpen. Victoria, what are you implying? Victoria glances at Adrian with a smug tilt of her head. Only that your future daughter-in-law has not been honest. She turns the screen for everyone to see. It displays a document, a hospital billing file with Mira's name and address, circled in red. Another image shows a late rent notice, and another shows the diner where Mira works, portrayed in a way that seems deliberately humiliating. This, Victoria says, is the real Mira Lawson. A woman drowning in debt. A woman who needs money far more than she needs love. A woman who might see our family as her ticket out of hardship. Mira feels the sting like a slap. Adrian rises instantly, fury tightening every line of his body. You dug into her private records, he demands. You violated her privacy. I protected the family, Victoria says smoothly. If she is marrying you for financial security, do we not deserve to know? Mira stands slowly, legs trembling, but not from fear anymore. From anger. From humiliation. From the ache of being stripped bare in front of strangers. You think I wanted this, she says. Her voice shaking but strong. You think I asked for any of it? I did not choose this world. Adrian brought me here. Exactly, Victoria snaps. And why would he bring someone like you unless you offered him something in return? The grandmother slams her spoon down. Enough, Victoria. But the damage is already done. Mira looks at Adrian, searching for something she cannot name. For a moment, their eyes lock, and she sees the conflict in him, the struggle between protecting her and confronting the brutal truth of the situation they created. Then one guest mutters under their breath, perhaps she is after the money. Mira feels her breath shatter. Adrian turns sharply. She is not. But the hesitation, the fraction of a second it takes him to respond, slices through her. It is small, almost invisible, but Mira feels it like a blade. She steps back. I cannot be here, she whispers. She turns and walks out of the dining hall, ignoring the startled gasps, ignoring the grandmother calling her name, ignoring the burn in her eyes. Adrian moves as if to follow, but his grandmother grabs his arm. Let her breathe, she commands. Chasing her now will only make this worse. Adrian stands frozen, torn between obedience and instinct, his heart pounding in a way he cannot control. Mira steps out into the cold night air, the sound of her heels echoing on the stone path. The world around her blurs as she tries to hold herself together. She came here trying to protect her dignity, and now she is the center of a scandal she never asked for. And the worst part is not Victoria's attack. It is the look on Adrian's face. The look that told her he was not entirely sure she was innocent. Cold wind cuts across the stone walkway as Mira steps farther from the estate, each breath sharp and painful as she tries to steady herself. The humiliation clings to her like frost. She wraps her arms around her torso, the midnight blue gown swaying against her legs, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Behind her, the heavy doors of the dining hall burst open. Adrian emerges into the night, his steps quick, purposeful, but Mira does not turn. She cannot. Mira, he calls, his voice low but strained. She keeps walking. He reaches her in a few strides, moving in front of her, blocking her path. His eyes hold a mixture she has never seen on him before, anger, guilt, something like desperation. Please, stop, he says. Mira finally looks at him. Her voice cracks. You hesitated. He closes his eyes briefly, the truth hitting him harder than her words. I know, he says quietly. And you have every right to walk away from me. Mira swallows hard. Victoria said all of that because she wanted to hurt me. But it was your reaction that broke me. Adrian steps closer, rain beginning to fall in soft cold droplets. I was blindsided. I should have protected you faster. I should have stood up for you before anyone else opened their mouth. That hesitation was not doubt in you, Mira. It was shock at the cruelty of my own family. She looks down at her hands, trembling. Everything she said, my debts, my job, it was true. She twisted it, but the facts were real. Adrian shakes his head. The truth does not define the person. Her intentions do. She weaponized your struggles to humiliate you, and I will not let her get away with it. Mira tries to breathe evenly, but emotion tightens her chest. I do not belong in your world, Adrian. Tonight proved it. No, he says firmly. Tonight proved you are stronger than all of them. You faced a room full of sharks, and you did not break until someone stabbed you with something personal. His voice is raw, stripped of the cold veneer he usually carries. And I failed you. I will fix this. Mira shakes her head. Some things cannot be fixed. Adrian reaches for her hand but stops himself, his fingers hovering inches from hers. Give me a chance to try, he whispers. Please. She meets his eyes, and for the first time since this arrangement began, she sees not the CEO, not the calculating strategist, but a man terrified of losing something he did not realize he cared for. What are you going to do? She asks. Adrian inhales deeply. Tell the truth. Publicly. To everyone. Before she can respond, he steps back and pulls out his phone, dialing a number with unwavering precision. I need a press conference, he says into the receiver. Tonight. Mira's eyes widen. Adrian, no more secrets, he says. No more hiding. No more letting anyone paint you as something. You are not. Within an hour, they arrive at a downtown conference hall where cameras and reporters gather hastily, murmuring with curiosity. Mira stands behind Adrian as he takes the podium, facing a sea of flashing lights. He looks powerful, composed, but when he speaks, his voice carries a gravity that silences the room. Tonight, he begins, a member of my family attempted to smear the character of the woman I am marrying. Reporters lean forward, pens ready. Mira Lawson is not a gold digger. She is not manipulating her way into this family. She is someone who has lived her life with integrity, working hard despite circumstances that would break lesser people. He glances back at Mira, his eyes softening. And I was wrong to let even a second pass before defending her. That moment of hesitation was my failing, not hers. Whispers ripple through the room. He continues, voice steady. Victoria Hale acted without the family's authorization, accessing private records and violating personal boundaries. Effective immediately, she is suspended from all Hale Dominion operations. Gasps echo. Adrian does not flinch. As for Mira, I asked her to marry me because I believed she was someone I could trust. Tonight proved that I was right. She is the strongest person in this room. When he steps back, the reporters explode with questions, but Adrian raises a hand and ends the conference. In the wings, Mira stands frozen, stunned by the weight of what he has just done. He walks to her slowly, uncertainty flickering in his expression. I meant every word, he says. Mira's breath shakes as she answers, then we might still have a chance. Rain begins to tap softly against the windows, and for the first time, neither of them moves away from the other. Something fragile, something real, settles between them, no longer hidden behind conditions or contracts. The hours after the press conference pass in a blur of rain streaking across car windows and streetlights humming in the dark. Adrian and Mira sit beside each other in the back seat of the SUV, neither speaking at first, both processing what he has just done. The city feels quieter than usual, as if holding its breath with them. When the car finally stops in front of the penthouse, Adrian steps out and opens Mira's door himself, something he has never done before. She looks up at him, surprised, and he simply says, "You deserved better tonight. The least I can do is start giving it to you." Inside, the penthouse is dim, lit only by the soft glow of the city spilling through the windows. Mira walks slowly toward the glass wall, pressing her fingers lightly against the cold surface. "I did not expect you to defend me like that," she says. "Not in front of the entire city." Adrian stands a few feet behind her, hands in his pockets, his voice quiet. "I should have done it sooner. If I had, you would not have walked out into the cold alone." Mira turns toward him. "You cannot fix everything just by making a speech." "I know," he says, stepping closer. "But I can fix what I broke between us." She studies him, searching for traces of insincerity, but there are none. For the first time since they met, he looks open, almost vulnerable. "The contract," she says softly. "That was supposed to protect us from emotions." Adrian lets out a breath that sounds almost like a laugh. "The contract protected me. Not you." Mira's heart beats faster. "And what about now?" Adrian moves until he is only a few steps away, his voice low and steady. "Now," he says, "I want to protect you because I care about you, not because a document tells me to." She feels the truth of it settling deep inside her. "Adrian," he takes a slow breath. "Mira, when I asked you to marry me, I told myself it was practical, logical, necessary. And it was. But somewhere along the way, something changed. You changed me." Her eyes sting with emotion. "I was never supposed to be more than a solution. You became the only thing that feels real in my life," he says quietly. "And when I saw you walk away from me tonight, I realized I cannot lose you. Not to my family, not to fear, not even to the contract we signed." Mira's breath catches. She steps closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then what do you want, Adrian?" He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a small velvet box. For a second, she freezes. Her heart races. Slowly, he opens it. Inside is a simple, stunning diamond ring that glows under the city lights. "I want to ask you again," he says, his voice rough with honesty. This time without conditions. Without fear. Without a deadline counting down in the background. He kneels, not as a CEO, not as a man fighting for control, but as someone finally choosing vulnerability. "Mira Lawson," he says, "will you marry me for real?" Tears gather in her eyes, blurring the skyline behind him. She presses her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his expression. "Adrian," she whispers, "yes. Yes, I will." He rises and slips the ring onto her finger, his hands warm and steady. When their eyes meet, something clicks into place, something quiet but powerful, like the final piece of a puzzle finding its home. He pulls her gently into his arms, and she does not resist. The city hums around them, alive and endless, as their hearts find a rhythm that feels like truth. Weeks later, their wedding is small, intimate, far from the spectacle the Hale family expected. The grandmother attends with a nod of approval that means more than words. Even Victoria, suspended and humbled, watches from a distance, silent for once. Adrian and Mira exchange vows beneath soft lights and a quiet sky, promising not perfection, not an empire, but something far rarer, honesty, partnership, and a love that began as a mistake and became the most authentic choice of their lives. When they kiss, the room erupts in warmth, and Mira feels something she has never felt before, not fear, not uncertainty, but home. And as they walk hand in hand into their new life, Mira realizes that the contract may have brought them together, but love, real love, is what will keep them there.